Before we really get a good chance to learn how to program, we need to answer some questions about what is programming and why it is so important. The first thing we need to understand is that computers are dumb. They won't do anything until they're told to do it. A computer will sit there and it will sit there and run and run and run and run and do nothing until it's been told to do something. It only knows how to do certain things or a limited amount of things. It is our programs that make our computers do more than that. They take all these little things to make bigger things happen. And it's very tedious to program with the native computer language. The native computer language consists of ones and zeros because that's how the circuitry works inside of the computer. Either a switch is on or the switch is off, so it understands ones and zeros. Well, the human brain doesn't work quite that way, and because it doesn't work quite that way, it's very tedious for us to go ahead and start programming the computer using the ones and zeros that the computer understands. So we need to have something else. We need to have a programming language. We need to have a language that will help us communicate with the computer. And this programming language is aimed at humans. They're aimed at us, which is why most programming languages try very hard to look a little bit like a language, like a human language. Okay? And just as human beings are out there, there are several different languages that the computers can use to provide that translation between the human and the computer, between the human's need for words and the computer's need for ones and zeros. Now, some of these different languages can do different things, and some languages are designed to do anything. These are called general purpose languages. And these are the languages that most people use. There are some specific languages that work only with certain products or certain other software, and I don't use those at all. I don't want to teach those. I want to teach a general purpose language. Now, of the general purpose languages, some are compiled and some are interpreted. Okay? So let's talk about what it means to be a compiled language. A compiled language is a language that basically takes the English words, puts them into ones and zeros, and stores all those ones and zeros in a file on the computer, and that file can be executed because it is the ones and zeros that operate on the computer itself directly. And then the interpreted languages keep everything back in the human language, and when you have the program, when you run your program, your interpreted language program, the interpreter comes in and converts those into the ones and zeros that the computer needs to understand. But it does not retain those ones and zeros. It executes those ones and zeros right away. So it's a line-by-line compilation and execution that differentiates between an interpreted language and a compiled language. Now, in order for me to teach you how to program, we're going to need to, well, have a language. We need to specify one particular kind of language. So I've chosen for this particular course to use the language Python to go in and teach you how to do it. And there's several reasons for me to use it. I'm going to talk more about it. But this just for you to understand that Python is easy to use and very easy to maintain. And all three of the OSs are supported by Python. Okay, so this is the language that we're going to be using. So what is the typical work cycle that a programmer works on? And these are the way most programmers work and most programming systems work. It works on this. You write the code, you compile the code, not needed if you're using an interpreted language, you execute the program, and then you debug, and then you repeat write, compile, execute, debug until you are done. And that's the basic work cycle that there is for any programming language out there. Very, very basic, Very simple to understand. Now, we talked about compiled, we talked about interpreted. So remember, compilers make standalone executables, what are called standalone executables. Remember, the compilers take each line of code, convert it into the appropriate ones and zeros, and then stores those ones and zeros in that file, and that is the standalone executable. It is capable of being double-clicked on and executed by the thing as is. And the languages that are compiled are C, C++, Java. Now these are not a totally exhaustive list of languages that are compiled versus interpreted, but I want you to understand that these are here. Now interpreted means that it keeps the source code, it does not retain the compiled code. That means the source code is executed, the source code's line then gets converted into the ones and zeros necessary, and those ones and zeros are executed. Now interpreted code is a little bit slower than compiled code. Compiled code executes faster because there's no need for the interpretation step, but interpreted code requires that you take the English, turn it into ones and zeros, and then execute the ones and zeros, and that extra step does add time. But some of the languages are extremely fast at doing this. So we have languages like Perl, like Python, and like BASIC, B-A-S-I-C, which actually is an acronym that stands for Beginner's All-Purpose Symbolic Interchange Code. All right. In this classroom, in this particular example, we're going to be using an interpreted language. We're going to be using Python, which is an interpreted language. Now, you're probably asking yourself, why are we using Python? Why did you choose Python? And I chose it because it's a modern language. That means that it has all the bells and whistles. It's an object-oriented language. It deals with objects. So it literally works with all the bells and whistles of the modern programming languages. So it is a modern language. Number two, there's a lot of opportunity with the language. It appears that there's a lot of need for programming for Python programmers. Now again, I'm not going to make you a finished Python programmer through the series of learning to program modules, but you will be a fairly decent one. And if you want to, there will be a module completely devoted to taking people and making them as expert as I can make them in the time that I have for these DVDs. So there's a lot of opportunity with this language. Okay, number two, it's an interpreted language. We're going to talk more about what that gives for us. And number three, you can get a Python interpreter for all of the three big OSs. You can get it for a Macintosh, Linux, and Windows. You can get them for all three of them. That's the reason why we're